Okay, I'm going to look at another sonnet. This is Sonnet 9. So the steps are, I'm going to start with the rhyming couplets, then we're going to look at the last word of each line, then we're going to split it into its 4 sections, then we're going to mark the breaths, then we're going to mark the césures. And these are the 5 steps we'll take before really beginning to read the sonnet, so that we've got a structure in which to begin. Its first line is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? We're not going to start by reading it. We're going to start by looking at the rhyming couplet. No love towards others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. So the rhyming couplet is like the summary of the sonnet, the punchline of the sonnet. So it gives us an idea of what we're talking about before we start to delve into it. No love towards others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. So you can't think about loving other people if you're so down on yourself. It's something like that. Okay, part 2, last words. We're going to read the last word of each line. Again, just to give us a context, to give us like a trailer. What are the standout moments? What words, leap out at us? So, I, life, die, wife, weep behind, keep mind, spend it, end it, sits, commits. So, words like it don't really tell you too much. But what words do? Well, we've got die, we've got wife. So, are we talking about love stories? Mind, spend, to enjoy. End, a finish, commits. So it looks like we're talking about a love story and the problems that are in there somewhere. So we don't have sword, we don't have storm, we're not having nature or particular danger. It looks like it's all love stories. So let's look at the 4 sections. So the sonnet is 14 lines. And that's 3 quatrains, 3 groups of 4, followed by the rhyming couplet. So we've got 4, 4, 4, 2. So you break your sonnet into those 4 sections. If you've printed it out, draw a line under each 4th line. If you've got it on your Word document, just hit the return key, give a space, so we can see how the sonnet is built. Now the first quatrain of a sonnet usually says, this is my problem. The second quatrain usually says, and not only that, but it's worse because of this. And then the third quatrain usually says, but here's the solution, here's the answer. And the rhyming couplet just sums it all up, gives you a kind of, and because of all that, we like to do this. It gives you like the moral of the story, as it were. Okay, now we're going to mark the breaths. You breathe when there's a new sentence. What is the beginning of a new sentence? Well, what ends the previous sentence? There's only 3 ways a sentence can end. It's the full stop, the exclamation mark, and the question mark. So they've all got the point, not colon, not semicolon. They are not sentence endings. They have a high value, but not like the exclamation mark, the question mark, the full stop. So on these sentence endings, you have to breathe. Now, I like to mark in with a forward slash. So we're going to breathe right at the start of the sonnet. A breath at the start and the breath at the end. That's for definite. Because again, when you finish a piece, you don't just hold your breath. People often do. You have to remind yourself to keep on breathing, even when you're finished. When you stop breathing, you die. You become invisible on stage and in front of the camera. You just disappear. Okay, so where's the first sentence ending? It's the end of the second line, forward slash. Next sentence ending, it. So it's the end of the third quatrain. And then the end of the rhyming couplet, commit. So we've got 1, 2, 3 sentences. Okay, so the middle section is one big long sentence. But we've split it into these quatrains. It's likely that at the end of each quatrain there'll be a high value punctuation which suggests a breath. So let's look at the end of the first quatrain, makeless wife. We've got the semicolon. Let's assume we're going to breathe there. At the end of the second quatrain, we've got the colon after mind. Let's stick in the breath. And then, obviously, at the end of the third quatrain, there's already a breath there. In the first quatrain, we've got, at the end of line 2, at the end of line 4, makes it even. Often you'll find in the sonnets, the breaths are every other line, but not always, and certainly not in Shakespeare's speeches. But that's enough breath, you know. A 2-line breath is enough. You know, we mark breaths because of punctuation, and we mark breaths for sense. And maybe because of our physicality can't handle it. But even then, we're marking it then for sense. Okay, in the second quatrain, we've only got this one breath, but it's 4 lines, it's a lot to do. So, let's look at the second line in the second quatrain. Is there any punctuation? Yes, there's a comma. So, without reading it, and I've not read this sonnet yet, but I'm going to mark in the breath. Now, if you've printed it out, always work with pencil, because then you can change your mind. Obviously, on the laptop, it's you click and change easy. Because I'm going to make a few assumptions based on you know, what is normal in Shakespeare, what is common, what the punctuation is telling us. And then we'll correct it if it's not quite right. Okay, let's look at the third quatrain. What's the punctuation at the end of the second line of the third quatrain? Or line 10 in the whole sonnet? Well, we've got another semicolon. So it's a high value punctuation, the highest value in the whole quatrain. So we can assume it's there. Okay, so that's given us a nice, even breath scheme. So the start and the end, and then every other line. We might have to change that, but we'll come to that in a moment. I'm still not going to read the sonnet. I'm going to move to step 5, the Césures. What's the césure? Well, every Shakespeare line is built of 2 halves. To be or not to be, that is the question. There's not a pause there, there's not a comma there. You can feel this natural break. And understanding the césures lets you know how to speak and flow through in your speech. Also, it tells you what not to do. There's no point putting a stupid, you know, like, is this a dagger that I see before me? The Shakespeare line is split into 2 parts. Often you'll find a comma there. Again, it's not a pause. There's really no such thing as a pause. So what's the first line? Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? So the césure is after fear. You couldn't say, is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? Again, you hear this all the time. It's people just not understanding English for a start. Do you want a cup of tea? I'm going for a walk. I'm going for a walk. I'm going for a walk to see the river. I'm going for a walk to see the river. You know, it's obviously I'm going for a walk to see the river. The césure is after walk, if I'm making that up. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? Is it because of this to do that? How does it break in 2? The second line, that thou consumest thyself in single life. That thou consumest thyself in single life. So the césure slightly later. That thou consumest thyself in single life. Could you? That thou consumest thyself in single life. That thou consumest thyself in single, that you do this in this after thyself. And again, the whole césure thing is good even when you've got a modern TV text. And you don't have to really break it up because of the difficulty of perhaps having enough breath to speak it. But you need to have that flow. And often the actors break up the line in order to try and sound interesting, which always makes them uninteresting. And again, it's one of the key reasons why theatres died, pretty much. It's plays that are about the plays that are built on a theme, not a story. That's a reason theatres died. And stupid phrasings, like no one sounds like they're speaking English. If thou issueless shall hap to die, if thou issueless if thou, without kids, shall happen to die. The world will wail thee like a makeless wife. The world will wail thee like a makeless wife. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life, breath? Ah, if thou issueless shall hap to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. There is an exclamation mark after the ah, but it doesn't start with an uppercase letter, the next. So on line 3 you've got ah, exclamation mark, if thou issueless. It's not really a new sentence. When you get the exclamation mark or question mark followed by the lowercase line continuing, I always think you've got the choice. Now, it seems a bit mad to breathe straight after single life. Arguably you could do. In this case, I would just run it straight through. Quatrain 2. The world will be thy widow and still weep. The world will be thy widow. The world will be thy widow and still weep. If you just say the world will be, we don't really know what you're talking about. The world will be thy widow and still weep. I think you've got to do it after widow. That thou no form of thee hast left behind. That thou no form of thee hast left behind. That you've not had any kids. No form of thee. Big theme in Shakespeare's sonnets. Have kids is this big theme. When every private, well, get laid, you could say. When every private widow well may keep. When every, see again, when every private widow well may keep. Sounds silly. When every private widow well may keep. This is yours after widow. By children's eyes, a husband's shape in mind. Now there's a comma after eyes. Often you'll find the comma in the caesure. So, the world will be thy widow and still weep, that thou no form of thee hast left behind. So the world will cry for thee that you don't have kids. When every private widow well may keep by children's eyes her husband's shape in mind, whereas a widow is comforted because they can see their husband in the eyes of their children, in the faces of their children. Quatrain 3. Look what an unthrift in the world doth spend. Shifts but his place, for still the world enjoys it. Shifts but his place, we've got it there, we've got a comma. I think after unthrift, look what an unthrift in the world doth spend. Shifts but his place, for still the world enjoys it. But beauty's waste hath in the world an end. Beauty's waste, this is your, hath in the world an end. And kept unused, the user so destroys. Is it unused or unused? Well, there's 10 syllables in a Shakespearean line, in an even line. And kept unused, the user so destroys it. I think it has to be unused rather than used, because if it's unused, we've got 12 syllables, which should be very rare. And kept unused, the user so destroys it. So unused, this is your. Into the rhyming couplet. No love toward others in that bosom sits. No love towards others in that bosom sits. That on himself such murderous shame commits. That on himself, this is your, such murderous shame commits. Now, before I get into reading it, I'm just going to check my caesures and breaths to make sure they are serving the sense of the text. It's all about the sense. I mean, always go for the sense rather than the poetry. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life? Ah, if thou issueless shall hap to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. The world will be thy widow, and still weep that thou no form of thee hast left behind. When every private widow well may keep, by children's eyes, her husband's shape in mind. Look what an unthrift in the world doth spend, shifts but his place, for still the world enjoys it. But beauty's waste hath in the world an end, and kept unused, the user so destroys it. No love towards others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. Okay, I think it works. It's a really key sonnet, this, especially for these times, you know. I mean, I don't have kids, and God knows why. Because I wanted to go and live in Paris and live in London and Los Angeles and all these things. And, you know, all these top 10 things you must do before you're 20, 30, before you die. It all feeds the narcissism of our age. So it's an illness. So I find this sonnet very sobering. But you know, I'm not dead yet. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life? Is it because you don't want to eventually die and upset someone, leaving them behind, that you stay single? Is that the reason? If thou issueless will hap to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. Well, if you don't have kids, the world itself, nature itself mourns you. Again, you don't get some flower spilling its seeds and none of them grow. None of them grow. Crazy. You know, you see all these frog spawns. What? None of them turn into little tadpoles, into little frogs? That would be tragic. The world will be thy widow, and still weep that thou no form of thee hast left behind. When every private widow may well keep, by children's eyes, her husband's shape in mind. So the world becomes your widow if you don't have kids, and will weep that no form of thee has left behind, no kids if you've got. Whereby a wife, if you've got kids, is comforted by them. So, the first bit, is this the reason why you don't have kids? Because it will be a tragedy if you don't. And if you're just worrying about upsetting someone, well, don't worry, because she won't be upset if she's got kids. And the final one, so what's the solution? So, look what an unthrift in the world doth spend, shifts but his place, for still the world enjoys it. So, your life's going to go anyway. You know, if you don't give of yourself, it will be taken from you anyway. So give. But beauty's waste hath in the world an end, and kept unused, the user so destroys it. If you don't transfer your beauty into the beauty of a child, it's a death in life. I know that is meant to be controversial these days, but if we don't have kids, that's the end of the human race. In 105, 110 years, everyone's dead, humans. You know, some people hate humanity, fair enough. For them it's a great joy. No love towards other. Yeah, and so even though those people have to find another person in which to express their philosophy too, you know, so they defeat their own purpose in having contained that philosophy. No love towards others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. So often at the end of a Shakespeare sonnet, we're given a joyful comfort. Here we're given a sober warning. No love toward others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. You know, this abstention from the world is a lack of love for others. This is staying alone. It's a great sonnet.